Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, my question is to the Premier. Premier, will you commit to a co-designed, inclusive and multi-partisan truth and treaty process to urgently establish a treaty for First Nations people in New South Wales?
Premier.
Well, I thank the member for her question. Look, I'm not sure what co-design would mean in its practical application. What I can say is that we'll be talking with First Nations people in New South Wales, the leadership of the Aboriginal community in this state, many of whom put their heart and soul into constitutional change and recognition via a referendum last weekend, and I think by common consent are hurting at the moment. Now, I don't pretend that Indigenous views on constitutional changes are ubiquitous. They're not. There are a variety of views, but the vast majority wanted that constitutional change. I do want to say that my government and the Minister for Aboriginal Affairs, of course, will be beginning consultations with First Nations people as soon as possible. And we do commit, after we speak to them and gain their sense of direction in relation to the next steps, we will of course bring that to the Parliament. We acknowledge that this is a hung Parliament, that we don't have a majority on the floor of the Legislative Assembly, and to the extent possible, wherever possible, bipartisanship is warranted, will be sought out, is needed in terms of pursuing multi-partisanship, I should say, in pursuing meaningful change when it comes to our First Nations residents. And the reason we need to do that is because what we're doing at the moment isn't working. And if you look at closing the gap data, New South Wales life expectancy for Aboriginals is 9.3 years lower for males and 7.6 years lower for females. As I said in the House last week, the leading cause of death for young Aboriginal men is suicide. We know that if you look at 17 socioeconomic outcomes, Indigenous people are at the lowest on all of those indices, and what we're doing isn't working. So, of course, we respect and acknowledge the result of the referendum on the weekend, but that does not mean that's the end of A, the pathway towards Indigenous reconciliation, and B, putting everything we can into closing the gap metrics, not just for health indices, not just for criminal justice indices, but also, and this is equally as important, in terms of symbolism for First Nations people. Symbols are important, and symbolic reconciliation is, if you speak to First Nations Australians that live in Australia's largest state, very important to them as well. So I can't give you easy answers. The truth of the matter is, after the defeat of the referendum on the weekend, I don't have easy answers for this, but we'll be guided by the leadership of the Aboriginal community in New South Wales, and of course, we'll bring that deliberation to the floor of this Parliament.